Welcome into the Big 1-2 here on 365 Sports. I'm Paul Catalina alongside JD Piquel, brought to you by Shorty's Pizza Shack. And listen, Longhorn fans, when you're in town this weekend for the game, it's an 11 o'clock kick. So after you're done, you're probably going to be hungry, probably a little thirsty, probably going to want a beer to either drown your sorrows or celebrate. Well, Shorty's Pizza Shack, 12th and Bagby here in Waco. Great pizza, great wings, great atmosphere. Going in there, even if you're wearing burnt orange, they'll welcome you with open arms. And it's a great place to go. Look, if you live here in Waco and you're watching us right now, if you come into Waco, go to Shorty's. It's awesome. You'll love it. It's a fun place to hang out. Great vibe at Shorty's. And JD, a really interesting week in the Big 12. And Texas and Baylor didn't even play. They're playing this week, which is an interesting game, probably the most interesting game in the league for this week. But a couple of things happened. One, Oklahoma State no longer unbeaten. Iowa State beats them in a very hard-fought game that came down to a very close call at the end on Spencer Sanders' run. Oklahoma State's not really going anywhere, but we were right about Iowa State. They were going to come in and mess things up for somebody. And look, they're in the race. So that top tier we talked about is Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State. That's the top tier. And Baylor could knock Texas out of the second tier this week if they beat them and stay in that top tier of teams with one or less losses in the conference now.
I believe Iowa State controls their own destiny. I mean, they legitimately, I thought they were like left for dead. They looked horrible against Iowa, looked good against Baylor, but not good enough. And for them to lose against a team like Baylor at that point in the year, we're all like, oh my gosh, what happened to Iowa State? But now Iowa State controls their own destiny. Oklahoma State controls their own destiny. Oklahoma controls their own destiny. And then Baylor is right on the fringe with needing just an Oklahoma State loss. So it is absolute madness in the Big 12. And so I'm glad that we get to do the big one too, because there's going to be zero shortage of content as
All
we
right,
approach.
let's talk about that Oklahoma State-Iowa State game first.
Right.
Spencer Sanders, it looks like they've maybe found a way for him to not murder their offense. Like they're kind of keeping within himself. He's still a risk taker, but they have certainly dialed back what they expect of him. And have maybe put him in positions where it's not, a turnover, or it's like a touchdown or turnover was kind of what he was doing. And you can't really live that way. But both those teams, Oklahoma State and Iowa State, tough as nails on defense. I was really impressed with the way that they both showed up. And, Iowa State, that was kind of the difference, was being at home, I think. That was the thing that pushed them over the line. And I came away impressed with how tough both teams were.
Yeah, if you play this game in Stillwater, it might be a different final score, but to your point exactly, black and blue kind of game. Both teams wanted to run the football. Neither team was really able to get it going too much, both Warren and Breece Hall in the 70-yard-ish range. So then, those kind of cancel out. So you look at quarterback, and if you told me Spencer Sanders is going to go for 225 yards, 3 touchdowns, 15-24, I would have said Oklahoma State's winning the game. Oklahoma State's going to find a way to win the game because Spencer Sanders isn't throwing 2 interceptions, but Brock Purdy just that much better, over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he was timely. He was very, very timely. So I was happy to see him have a game like that his senior year at Iowa State.
Yeah, it was a really good one. Now, the wildest game of the Big 12 had to be Oklahoma and Kansas, the one that was weird. I mean, it's 10-0 Kansas at halftime. Oklahoma's been on this roll. I do think, and I don't want this to be an oversimplification, JD, but Oklahoma took them for granted.
Yeah.
And Kansas decided this is going to be our moment in the sun, and they did everything they could. And then they're only down by a score after Oklahoma has really put on a show in the second half of doing what they do. And then you get a 4th and 1 where Caleb Williams rips the ball out of his own teammate's hand to get a first down, something that I've never seen before. I don't think we'll ever see it again. And he probably shouldn't have done it, but it worked.
Yeah, you and I were talking before the show. We're like, that's cool that it worked, and it honestly was a really entertaining play and great for Oklahoma to keep their drive alive, keep their chances alive in that. Not chances alive because they were up by a score, but keep their momentum in that game. Probably a horrible idea. Like, I guarantee you Lincoln Riley did not tell Caleb Williams, hey, let's try and emulate this into our playbook next week. Let's make sure we do the old steal the ball from Kennedy Brooks play if we get to 4th down. So lucky play in a lot of ways, kind of a heady play, but not something you're going to probably recreate. But, I mean, that game was weird. That game was very, very strange.
It has not changed my opinion on Oklahoma at all. Everybody has these things, especially when you're on a streak like they are. You have the times where you're playing a bad team and you play down a little bit. And give a credit to Kansas. They're starting to figure things out. They're starting to figure things out of what they can and can't do. And they played really hard and they played really well. So, the bottom line is Oklahoma is just more talented and deep. That's all that was.
The one thing I would add is Oklahoma coming off of 2 pretty emotional weeks, like having the comeback win in the Red River rivalry. Then you got to go change quarterbacks. You don't have to, but it looks like you might need to change quarterbacks if you're Oklahoma. Make that switch. You don't think you were just excited as all get out if you're a Sooner to see, great, we got Kansas. Thank goodness we got Kansas. Out of the last 2 weeks we had, phenomenal. And I do think you probably have issues on that defensive line because the one takeaway I got from this game, and I don't think tremendously different about Oklahoma, but I do think Kansas kind of laid the blueprint out for Oklahoma to be beaten. Run the football, extend the game, keep that high potent offense off the field, have a chance to maybe make it interesting.
Which is why Baylor and Oklahoma State down the line for them pose big challenges because that's exactly how they want to win games. Exactly what they want to do, especially Oklahoma State, who would love to win in a rock fight anytime, anywhere. We just talked about them. Kansas State beats Texas Tech 25-24. Another game that Texas Tech had in hand. They lost, and that was the final nail in the coffin for Matt Wells, who, in spite of being an insanely nice guy and a really solid football coach for a lot of different places, just not Texas Tech. They didn't have an identity. They didn't have, it was just, you never knew what they were going to do each week. And I think it was just too many one-score games. He's not very good, and you got to win those games. You got to win the close ones and not get blown out. And he didn't do either of those things. They got blown out, and they didn't win the close ones. And so, it's unfortunate that he has to go, and we'll talk about in the next segment, like what that coaching carousel means, but Texas Tech loses, Kansas State wins. Kansas State now becomes pretty dangerous for the rest of the year. That they might be kind of playing confident that they've got, a conference win under their belt. They played the hardest teams in the conference first. They still have, teams like West Virginia. They have TCU this week, a team that is reeling that we'll talk about here in a second. But, good things for Kansas State, bad things for Texas Tech out of that one.
And they'll play Baylor November 20th in Manhattan. So if you're a Baylor Bear fan, potentially how that game goes against Oklahoma the 13th could be a trap game. I mean, there's a lot of things that will go into that, so maybe we're looking too far ahead, but worth noting Kansas State's going to have an interesting one there. I always feel a little bit weird about coaches being fired after close losses because if that game goes the other way and let's say Texas Tech wins by, they hold them off and win by 2 points, a field goal, whatever it is Matt Wells a worse coach for, winning that game by a couple points? I mean, as a whole, I think it was just this is the right season to do it. I don't know if that's the right game to do it, but the writing had been on the wall for some time, especially after Shuck went down.
Well, also, and here's the other thing you have to remember, is we are now in a period where the signing period's not the first week in February anymore. That's kind of like the bonus day, what the normal signing period was. The real signing period is in December, that week of Christmas or before, the early signing period, which they don't need to call it that. That's National Signing Day. So National Signing Day is in December now. Well, it's the end of October. So we're at the end of October. So if you're going to make a change, you need to at least let the recruits know that a change is coming because you don't want to wait until the end of the season and then have 2 weeks to recruit when you fire a coach. That's why LSU did what they did. USC did it just because, it was time. And they really needed to get a jump because they're kind of in a different stratosphere of the way that they recruit to that school than even a lot of their places. And, of course, Washington State did it for a completely different reason altogether because of a vaccine mandate, which is something I do not want to get into at all. But that's why you do it. You tell the recruits, here's the deal. There's a change coming. And that change may not come until – the week after the season's over, but at least you don't have to, you're not leaving a coach out there to recruit players he's never going to coach.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing is recruits, you're not sending a coach out to recruit on the road, and he's not going to do it. So I think that's why you do it now. It's an unfortunate side effect of that signing period, but we're going to see it more and more and more.
Yeah, if it wasn't this game, it would have been somewhere down the line. I think you probably could have done it earlier, honestly. I mean, it looks better optically because your record, you're
5-3.
Yeah,
so.
you're 5-3, which is – okay, you knew you were going to fire him before this game, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And the alumni were kind of over it with him. And then the last game we'll talk about here in this segment was it's a devastating loss for TCU.
Yeah.
It's a devastating loss. They've now lost to Oklahoma, Texas, SMU, and all those you can kind of get. But West Virginia is not a good team this year. They've got a lot of problems. And they lost to West Virginia and gave up 29 points to an offense that's not scoring. Only scored 17 against a defense that wasn't stopping anybody. So, I mean, there's some questions going on at TCU right now that have not been there in a long time. Now, I don't think anything's going to happen, and we'll talk more about this, but thoughts on this game specifically. TCU, we talk about Texas Tech not having an identity. TCU doesn't really have one either. Like, what do they do? What do they do well? Give Zach Evans the ball.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
But then they don't seem to do that enough. Mm-hmm. They don't seem to take pressure off of Max Duggan. Max Duggan seems like he's be a guy you can win with. Mm-hmm. Does the defense get in anybody's way? Not really anymore. So what do they do well at TCU right now? That's a huge question because they've lost to all the good teams they played so far, and they've lost to one bad team, which makes you think that this team, sitting there 3-4, needing to make a bowl game year in and year out, they're kind of keeping their head above water. Something's got to change for Gary Patterson.
TCU is kind of like that basketball player right now that can only dribble with his right hand. Like, they're great running the football at times, but if you stop the run, like, for example, Zach Evans, 18 carries, 62 yards. Okay, so your right hand is gone at this point. Can you go left? Well, no. Max Duggan threw 2 picks. Well, can you stop anyone on defense? Haven't been able to stop anybody on defense all year long. So once you take away their right hand, there is no other counter that they have available. And credit to West Virginia, I interrupted you earlier in your explanation, so I apologize. But what I was saying was they're like the Walking Dead right now. Last week, I'd left them for dead. I was like, okay, well, they've obviously thrown in the flag, got run up by Baylor. Offense is questionable at best. Jarrett Dagey played phenomenal last game, 21 of 28, 257 yards. Like, I'd left them for dead, and they come in this game and look great against TCU. So credit to West Virginia, but I do think that you got real problems at TCU. You got to look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah. We're going to talk coaching carousel in the next segment of who we think for Texas Tech, and then a couple other programs in the Big 12 who have questions, one of them being TCU and the other one being West Virginia. But I do want to talk and look ahead a little bit to Texas and Baylor this week because this is Baylor's biggest game of the season, and I don't say that lightly. It's Texas. It's a rival, even though it may not be as big of a rival to Texas as it is to Baylor, but this is a rival. This is a huge moment for them because not only can they win and keep pace in the race this week, they're both coming off a bye. They can put Texas out of it. And if they beat Texas, Texas has 3 losses in the conference. They're out of this thing. They're out of it. So they can, put another team out of the discussion and keep themselves in it. I think that's huge. That's really huge for them. And they're playing better than Texas is right now. They're finishing games where Texas isn't. All signs point to Baylor, but you got to think that Texas is going to shake out of those doldrums soon enough.
You would think so. I think Steve Sarkisian is the right guy for the job long term. I hope he gets enough time, and I think he'll get a reasonable amount of time. But this has enormous implications in recruiting. I don't pretend to know how many recruits will be there for Baylor, but if you're an in-state kid and Baylor is sort of trending upwards and, well, hey, we just beat UT. You want to come play for us. Don't go play for that school in Austin. We're the dominant program in Texas. Come play for us in Waco. That's where we play football. I think that's a really big thing to keep an eye on is how much this will impact recruiting, especially, like you said, with the early, quote-unquote, signing day.
Yeah, it's a big one for Baylor. And, look, Texas can't stop anybody either. And Baylor runs right at you. So it's a bad matchup. And I'm curious, look, Bijan Robinson is a bad matchup for anybody. He's going to be a bad matchup when he goes to the NFL in 2 years. I mean, he's a bad matchup for everyone because he's that good. So Baylor's going to have to stop him. They did a pretty good job on Breece Hall for the most part. And that would be, I guess, his equal opposite number that, you would think that they've played so far. So they've got a good shot. I think everything points to Baylor for this. But again, Texas had the bye week. They've had time to kind of maybe shake out of the woe is us, and they're going to come in. They're hungry. They're hungry for a win. And sometimes you'd rather play a team that's overly confident than one that's painted into a corner.
And the interesting fact that both of these teams are coming off bye week. So it won't be they just played Oklahoma State and are all beat up. They've had a week to rest now. Baylor's had a week to rest now. And it really is put up or shut up for Texas. Like you said, if they lose this game, they're not winning the Big 12. They're already kind of outside looking in right now. And for Baylor, the stakes are high as well because you are one Oklahoma State loss away from controlling your own destiny. So a lot of pride as well as Big 12 implications on the line. Really interested to see can you force Texas to not be able to beat you with Bijan Robinson? Like, is Bijan Robinson, are you just saying, okay, he's going to get his 100 yards and we'll try and outscore him? Or are you able to take him away and say, no, beat us with Xavier Worthy, beat us with Casey Thompson in the read option game? If they can neutralize Bijan Robinson, this gets a whole lot more interesting to me. I'm with you. He might just be one of those guys like Cade Cunningham. He's going to get his 30. He's going to get his 20, whatever it is. But I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. When we come back, we'll talk about the coaching carousel. Matt Wells out at Texas Tech. What's next? And who else should maybe be looking over their shoulder a little bit in the Big 12? This is the Big 1-2 brought to you by Shorty's Pizza Shack on 365 Sports. Shorty's Pizza Shack at 12th at Bagby is a homegrown, family-owned and operated must-visit pizza place in Waco. Fantastic pizza by the slice or get the whole pie to share. Great happy hour specials every single day, and it's not just pizza. Great wings. You have to try the Sikkim sauce, chili cheese fries, pizza pillows, and more. Dine in for a great hangout or carry-out. Order online at shortyspizzashack.com or do yourself a favor and bring your crew to the restaurant at 12th and Bagby. Shorty's Pizza Shack. Tell them Paul sent you by. Welcome back into the Big 1-2 here on 365 Sports. Paul Catalina, JD Piquel, Armstrong Sims producing. Of course, thanks to Jack McKenzie as well for his setup. And, of course, thanks to Shorty's Pizza Shack. I'm very hungry right now. All I can think about is some Sikkim sauce wings. And it occurs to me that I could have just asked our sponsor to bring us some. And I haven't done that yet.
All right.
So as I failed with bringing Shorty's, so has JD failed with bringing orange slices and Capri Sun for a victory lap after the show. Armstrong's been distraught about it for weeks. So much so that he'll send me crying emojis when he goes home. He just feels like maybe you didn't reward him for his hard work, and he's vitamin C deficient at that point too, so he might get scurvy, and that's on you.
Yeah, I mean, I got to do my 1/3. What it comes down to is this is a team effort, and I'm not holding up my end of the bargain. So to both of you, I'm sorry, and I'll be better in future shows. Promise.
Yeah, I wish people knew. I wish just hashtag Orange Slice Capri Sun. Just we bring that up if we have a good show.
It happens pretty frequently. I was surprised it didn't happen when I walked in the door today because Jack McKenzie will typically say, "JD, where the orange slices?" I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
It was such a random thing after a soccer game, wasn't it? Just like, hey, here, have a piece of an orange and a Capri Sun.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm starving. I don't want an orange slice. I want something of substance. I want some sustenance.
Yeah.
Substance.
Substance with sustenance.
I want both.
Yeah.
Not an orange slice.
Yeah. Let's go to Mr. Gaddy's or the pizza buffet and throw down. It's
or
it's
Shorty's.
Yeah, Shorty's, exactly. I shouldn't say that. Yeah. Let's go to Shorty's and throw down. But Shorty's didn't exist when I was 7. But yeah, go to Shorty's, exactly. Throw down. Good place for after Little League as well, for the parents and the kids as well. JD, the coaching carousel begins to turn in the Big 12. It has nationally. We've seen Coach O out at LSU. We saw Clay Helton out at USC, Nick Rolovich at Washington State. Those are the big ones that have happened so far. And today, well, as of this taping, which is on Monday, I'm sorry. But as of this taping, Matt Wells has just been let go at Texas Tech. And that brings up questions of who's next at Texas Tech. Kirby Hocutt made it clear he wants someone with Texas ties. And of all the schools that have to pick coaches, like LSU's, I mean, they've got a really tough thing. So does USC, to make their fans happy and bring in somebody that they think they can win a national title with. And Texas Tech, while I'm sure their fans would love to win a national title, right now they're looking for somebody to give them an identity, give them, bring back what they had with Mike Leach, which I'm not saying bring back the air raid, but when you had Mike Leach, everybody knew what you were going to do. You knew who you are. They could walk in and they were confident in what they were going to do. That's not what they are, and that's not what they have been, even under Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury had Patrick Mahomes and didn't go to a bowl game. That's why he got fired. So, they have not hit on it. There's been a problem hiring football coaches. They need to get this right. And Kirby Hocutt says a coach with Texas ties. First, your thought about Matt Wells getting let go. At 5-3, we talked about it a little bit, but this is kind of a function of college football now.
Yeah, I think he was fired probably much earlier in the year. And I say whether it was actually communicated to him or not, I think the decision was made probably around the time where you figured, okay, the Tyler Shuck experiment either A, isn't working, or once he went down, you're like, okay, this isn't going to – I mean, that was the whole lifeline for Matt Wells, was bringing in a grad transfer quarterback. So it's unfortunate. Like you said, it seems like to be – I mean, I have no personal experience. It seems like one of the kindest human beings. But in the early signing period, based on what Texas Tech had done against, opponents that really count, which is the Big 12, they weren't going to be relevant. And so I'm glad that they're able to now rebuild at this point in the year to where they're not going to have to be starting with the later signing period. So it makes sense. It's unfortunate, but I think it is just kind of a byproduct of where college football is right now and where Texas Tech is right now.
Yeah, I think so. And look, as far as replacements go, I did a top 5 on this. If you guys want to look it up on the 365 Sports YouTube channel, you can look at it. But I just did the top 5 on this. And what I would say is Sonny Dykes, son of Spike Dykes, is rolling at SMU right now. Jeff Traylor rolling with the Roadrunners at UTSA right now. And Jeff Traylor, when asked by Jason Minix from ESPN San Antonio today, said, look, the kids know he wants to stay here. He wants to do this. He said all the things that you say because he hasn't been offered the job yet. But I would think that Jeff Traylor is one of the two main targets, with Sonny Dykes being the other one. And I think that most fans would prefer Jeff Traylor because he's young. Every high school coach in the state respects him. I mean, nearly to a man. They love him because he was head of the Texas High School Coach Association. He's a great recruiter. He's an even better guy. I say this with a little bit of bias. He's on our show all the time. We've known him really well. But he is the kind of coach that can get recruits to West Texas, which is convincing you that, look, everything around you and close isn't important. It's about being in the college town and being part of the college experience, and there's very few college programs that are in big cities that are great. Boston College is the biggest one in Boston, and they're okay. So Austin is a big city, but it's also a college town. Dallas isn't a college town at all. It's just a big city that happens to have colleges. Miami, it's not. So but you do have, inherent recruiting advantages when you're recruiting somewhere that's close to places like Athens, Georgia, or even Waco, Texas, an hour and a half to everywhere you want to go.
Yeah.
But Lubbock is a long way away from everywhere you want to go. So you have to really kind of convince people that, that's not important. You're here for 4 or 5 years. Just focus on the now and come play for me. And they haven't had that since Mike Leach, really. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury even had that. He wasn't a very, very good recruiter. Do you see what he's doing in the NFL right now? He doesn't have to recruit. He doesn't have to worry about defense. It's the best team in the NFL so far this season.
Yeah, a sweet house, too.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, things at Texas Tech are a little bit more complicated, but I would look at those two guys. Do you have anybody in mind outside those two, or what do you think about those two guys?
I guess Kendall Briles is the name that'll get thrown around. I think – truthfully, the fact that it's in the Big 12 could be appealing to him with the way that he left Baylor and probably the way that I would imagine he feels about Baylor right now. Going back to those two between Dykes and Traylor, I would have to imagine behind closed doors, Traylor would be a guy to where this is like a step up, obviously, to take a head coaching job at a Power 5 school. Sonny Dykes has been a Power 5 head coach before. He's been in those kinds of positions. In my opinion, Sonny Dykes is kind of sitting on a winning lottery ticket in SMU. Phenomenal college town. You don't have to recruit against the Baylors, the TCUs. You're in a spot where you can really build a group of 5 school that will, in a lot of circles, believe will be in the Big 12 in the not too distant future. So I think Traylor is a more, it's a more sensical fit in my mind for both parties. I think if you could have either or, you definitely get that identity with Dykes. What you're getting as a program for the fan base if you get Dykes, for just maybe more the casual fan.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think it's a really interesting job because, like you said, you aren't necessarily in the epicenter of Texas, but you're in the Big 12 college town. You're recruiting as TCU and Baylor, which is a tall task right now.
Well, there's only 2 guys that ever won there. One was Spike Dykes, Sonny's dad, and the other one was Mike Leach. And Mike Leach isn't coming back. That's not going to happen. And the closest thing you get to Spike Dykes is be Sonny, but that not necessarily means that Sonny would do well there. Plus, he's rolling at SMU. There's a really good chance, and I'm telling you right now, there's a really good chance that SMU is in the Big 12 in a couple years. So if that's the case, do you necessarily want to leave SMU knowing you're going to be at a P5 in a couple years, and they're not going to bother you? I mean, they're not going to bother you. You go to Texas Tech, and they're going to be, we've got to win, right now, or you're like, please bring the magic back or something. I think somebody like Jeff Traylor will get a little bit longer leash, because if you bring in Jeff Traylor, you're saying we are starting from the ground up. We're going to change our whole philosophy about everything, about the way we recruit, the way we do things, and that's probably, to me, their best choice. But who knows if he really even wants to go there? He may not. Maybe it's not his goal to be at Texas Tech. So
yeah, even from a dollars and cents standpoint, I would imagine you could probably get a lower price tag. I don't know by how much. I'm completely speculating. I would imagine you don't have to back the Brinks truck up quite as much as you would for a guy like Sonny Dykes, who's in Dallas, has been at that level before. Whereas for Jeff Traylor, this is his big shot. This would be the big job for him. So maybe you're able to kind of buy low and not sell high, but maybe you're just able to buy low.
Yeah. Now, it brings me to a couple other jobs. West Virginia, I know that there's some West Virginia fans that have kind of completely, they're done with Neil Brown. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think Neil Brown has some support in the athletic department, maybe not, but that team is kind of treading water. I don't know if they should make a move. I like what he has going there, but he has got to get a quarterback, and maybe it is Garrett Green, maybe it's him. But he has got to have an offense that week to week can score points. Because we know he can coach defense. We know he can do that. Or they can coach defense. He was an offensive coach when he came from Troy. But they're going to have to get a little more creative there. But I think the big one I'll talk about is, look, if you're a TCU fan right now, and there's been some smoke around, a lot of stuff written about it. He talked about Matt Jennings, who we had on Signal 365 Radio. He's talking about guys in press conferences. There's some heat around Gary Patterson that's never been there before, and he's feeling it, whether it's perceived or real. But I gotta say, if you're TCU, look at Gary Patterson. Is the stadium full? Never. Are they winning games? Here and there. Are they contending for the conference title? Nope. What are they doing? What are you getting out of Gary Patterson right now? He's got a statue outside. That makes it hard, but all-time winningest coach there. But sometimes maybe it's time to move on just because you need a change of philosophy.
Yeah, I think it's so tough with those coaches that have been there for so long. I mean, you could speak to it. Bobby Bowden was more or less forced out. It was his time to go, and the administration made that decision but allowed him to step down, quote-unquote. I think that's kind of a similar situation you'll have with Gary Patterson and TCU. I mean, Gary Patterson is TCU football through and through. I mean, he is what built that program. He is what put them on the map. Gary Patterson is to thank for all the success that's come to TCU's way. So I think it's going to be really difficult to force him out quite as harshly as you would a guy like Matt Wells. And that probably goes without saying, but that's a situation that will be really interesting to see, okay, how do you handle that? Because just as quickly, I thought that TCU was going to have a real shot to make some noise this year in the Big 12, and they're truthfully a couple defensive stops away from having a different record right now against Texas, and obviously a couple defensive stops against West Virginia a week ago. But there's a lot of pieces in place for Gary Patterson to be successful. I think he's got to look at a staff around him and say, okay, you got to go, because we got the guys on campus in a lot of positions to get it done.
Sonny Cumbie was on his staff. He's the interim coach at Texas Tech right now, and he kind of ran him out. He very publicly chastised him after very publicly chastising Doug Meacham before he sent Doug Meacham off and then brought Doug Meacham back. So he's getting to the point where he can only bring guys who kind of understand his circle, and I think he's getting to the point where he's not bringing in new innovative people. He's just bringing in people that he likes. And sometimes you need to bring in somebody who's going to challenge you and make you do things differently. Gary Patterson, Matt Jennings pointed this out in the column that he wrote, but a couple weeks ago against Oklahoma, they're down. It's fourth down at the Oklahoma 38-yard line. He punted. Against Oklahoma, I know you're trying to play the field position game, but to that team with Caleb Williams, and they were hot, and your defense not being able to stop anybody, field position didn't really matter. Field position, time of possession in that game with Oklahoma did not matter. You need to get, when you're on their side of the field, you got to get points. And they didn't do that. And it's little things like that kind of keep happening. The SMU incident where he was just convinced that SMU had run over Jerry Kill. even after, you can show them the video like, nope, your team did it. Yeah, maybe the FCMU situation created the fact that he fell over, but they didn't run him over.
Sure.
It wasn't a plot to, hurt and maim. It was just how it was. I mean, look, I can go back 10 years or so and calling out Art Briles for stealing plays in a game he won by 34 points. Not Art Briles won by 34 points. A game that Gary Patterson won by 34 points. Accused the opposing coach of stealing plays in a game he won comfortably.
Yeah.
You have, and look, he's been protected there in TCU. He's got a little bubble. But eventually, when you're the crazy guy on the lawn, when some new neighbors move in, they're like, what's the deal with a crazy guy on the lawn?
Right.
That's just Gary. No.
Yeah.
No. They're not going to put up with that anymore. So, yeah, he's got some people calling him out now, and I think rightfully so. Now, I don't know if Gary Patterson needs to be fired at TCU or not. I don't know. But I do know that he needs to change some things, and that includes things about himself. I think he's a next-level football genius.
Yeah.
He's a next-level football genius on the level of Bill Belichick. That kind of genius. Okay. Yeah. But the difference between Bill Belichick and Gary Patterson is Gary Patterson hears every single thing that's ever said about him and takes it to heart. Bill Belichick might, but doesn't care. Does not care. He's going to get up and go to work and go, look, we're going to play football this week, and the Patriots, we got to do the things that we do.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he does. Sure. He doesn't care. He just doesn't affect him. He goes to work because, again, anything that we say doesn't matter. Just go, anything the media says doesn't, think they're not doing a good job. I don't think you're doing a good job, Gary. It doesn't matter. I'm not the guy who's going to hire or fire you.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you my opinion. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about football geniuses too, Nick Saban, and why has Nick Saban been successful for so long? He adapts. He adapts with the culture. He brought Lane Kiffin in when there was okay, everybody's going up tempo. Everyone's throwing the ball. Everyone's scoring points. We have to do that to stay relevant. Gary Patterson has to adapt to find a way to win again at TCU. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and he hasn't, it's adapt or die. I mean, that's what it is, and he has not adapted. Nick Saban begrudgingly kind of pulled in that spread offense. For a while, he was trying to say, look, we should change the rules and
hurt players,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was well, they're not going to do that. I tried, so I can do what's comfortable to me, but that's obviously not going that way. So now we're going to go this way. If you can't beat them, join them. And now you see what's going on. It's worked. You adapt. And look, if the spread stops working for him, guess what? He'll scrap it in a heartbeat and go back to whatever works.
Yeah.
He'll run if the wishbone gets popular again, guess what? He'll be the first guy to go. Wishbone's the way we got to go.
He will find what works. He made a deal with the devil bringing on Lane Kiffin. You think 0% of Nick Saban wanted to bring on Lane Kiffin, but for the betterment of his team, his program, for his longevity, made some tough decisions. So I'll be interested to see, is Gary Patterson willing to do that? I don't know. He needs to, though, if he wants to stay around.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back, Chalk Talk, Abram Smith, wide zone, why it works and why he's perfect for it with JD Pickell. This is the Big 1-2, brought to you by Shorty's Pizza Shack on 365 Sports. Life is back on, sports bettors, and BetUS has your NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, UFC, PGA, and yes, NFL betting lines up for their 27th year and live betting on all of it. Log into BetUS.com or call 800-792-3887. That's 800-79-BETUS. BetUS for 125% bonuses with promo code SICK'EM125. Customer service pros are ready to get your phone, social, and online sports betting kickoff started now. Play with the proven mainstay in the industry. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS.com. Use promo code SICK'EM125. Born in Waco, Brotherwell Brewing exists to serve the Central Texas community with locally crafted beer of the highest quality. They want to bring Central Texas closer to the brewing experience so everyone can enjoy well-made beer as much as they do. For 2.5 years, they've been bringing high-quality beer to Central Texas at their location on Bridge Street in East Waco. Brotherwell Brewing believes in community and bringing people together to enjoy products made in their community. So for your game day, whether it's a tailgate or at home, stop by Brotherwell Brewing for high-quality craft beer made right here in Central Texas, 400 East Bridge Street, and check them out online at brotherwell.com. Welcome back into the Big 1-2 here on 365 Sports, brought to you by Shorty's Pizza Shack. Paul Catalina, JD Piquel. It's time for Chalk Talk. And JD, this week we're diving into Abram Smith. And look, if we kind of maybe go a little too gaga for Abram Smith, maybe it's because he plays right across the river from where we are, or that he's just such a perfect fit for this wide zone offense. We talked about the wide zone offense in Chalk Talk early in the year when you were kind of showing what Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos were bringing to Baylor. Now we're seeing it in practice, and Abram Smith is perfect for it. Perfect for this offense, and has been just a revelation for Baylor running the ball this year, doing things that they haven't been able to do for a couple years. The easiest one would be just get 3 yards running straight ahead. They couldn't do that for a long time. He gets way more than that, but there's so much more to Abram Smith in this wide zone offense.
He's a guy that is shining in this offense, who was playing linebacker just a season ago. So for him to flip back to running back, be able to take the load as Baylor's running back, kind of that 1-2 punch with him and Ebner, it absolutely phenomenal. A perfect fit, like you mentioned. Also a guy that doesn't probably get enough love across the conference, because you got guys like Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. It's very understandable why he does, but that's why we're here. We're here to give him his due and allow credit where it is deserved. So right here, the wide zone. Again, the bread and butter of what Baylor does. We're going to show you a couple different ways how this can hit and how it has hit for Baylor, especially against BYU, because Abram Smith had something like 180 yards on the ground that day. Show you how it happens. So one of the, primary ways you want the wide zone to hit, when I say hit, essentially how you want to gain yards, the way that the hole can be created. Again, outside and man line of scrimmage is where you're going to be reading. So he flies out, you're up and under, he's in, you're standing on your track. So right here, they do a great job on a combo block. So on an inside zone, it's the guard in the center right here, going to be comboing. On the outside zone, it's your tackle and your tight end. Call that a combo block. So he is reading their block right here. In this case, they don't get a ton of movement. They just get a good push, but not a ton of movement laterally. So pretty much just stays in this spot and just watch what happens. So he's reading right here, boom. Eyes are staying on this. We got a great lock on here, good contact. Look, we're just pushing him back. So if I'm Abram Smith, heck yeah, I'll run behind my guys all day, run behind green shirts, baby. Pushing him all the way upfield. Look at this. Anytime you got your tight end, who again is the lead block on this play, pushing your man, let's call it 20, 25 yards downfield, he's escorting him down the sideline. A big reason why this play hits so frequently. So right there, nothing super fancy about it. You keep your man essentially in his base position. Follow green shirts, what Abram Smith did very, very well here. Nothing too fancy about it. So that's one way it can hit. The other way it can hit is you put your foot in the ground and just get north. So what they tell you to do as a running back is press heels. What does press heels mean? It means you're going to run towards his heels as long as you possibly can to make this, again, end man on the line of scrimmage, who we're reading here, going to make him pick a direction. So we've shown you multiple times. Again, I'm not going to draw it up again, but if he goes one way, you're going the opposite way. So Abram Smith, great job here, pressing heels. It's not a cutback, it's more of a cut up. So they call it being decisive, getting north and south. Watch what his right foot does right here. Boom, right there. Big hole, very decisive runner, runs behind his pads, finish run. Finish the run. So Abram Smith, a guy that's very physical, and we talked about it before in the preseason. Algier for BYU, who we saw shine in this offense a season ago, was nationally ranked in rushing yards, also a converted linebacker. So something to these linebackers getting ahead of steam, getting downhill, finishing runs.
Well, I remember Dave Aranda when asked about why you changed Abram Smith over. He said, look, there wasn't anybody on the roster who could do what he does. Yeah. And that's not another, at that point, they didn't have some of their true freshmen like Jordan Jenkins, all those guys coming in. But, it says something about, what they're trying to get out of Treston Ebner. He's not that kind of runner. Now, he's been a better runner in this offense. We haven't seen a lot of Quaylon Jones and Tay McWilliams, but those are things that, especially Tay McWilliams, will have to do down the line. But it's something that Abram Smith does very well. It's kind of his natural instinct to, I'm going to get as far as I can before somebody hits me. And then I'm going to lower my pads and make him pay for it. They didn't have that before, and you can see it in those runs where he's decisive. I'm going to go here. I'm not going to waste time back here. The point of football is to get 10 yards that way. Mm-hmm. And he goes that way.
Absolutely. And if you want to be really philosophical, metaphorical, Treston Ebner is like a jitterbug, right? You get him in space and he's slippery. It's hard to get hands on him. Abram Smith is like a tidal wave. It doesn't matter where the opening is. He's going to find it. He's going to be going forward the entire time. So whether you catch him at the line of scrimmage or whether you get him a three yards downfield, he's going to find that daylight and run through it very, very well. So one more way that this can hit is the cutback. So at this point in the game, third quarter, 24 points. Abram Smith's probably had 2 touchdowns at this point in the game, run for well over 100 yards. At this point, if you're BYU, you're tired of getting beat to the outside. So look, you got your end line of scrimmage right here. So they're adding an extra safety in the box right here. We'll call that in the box. He's walked up quite a bit. He's run support. They are trying to take away the outside run play they've had all day long. So they've been beat there multiple times. They're like, hey, we're sick of this. We're just going to stop you right here. If you beat us somewhere else, fine. We're not getting beat to the edge. So again, pressing heels, reads right here. Press. So look, this read right here, you see his helmet is essentially on the inside shoulder of his block right there. That tells him, okay, I'm getting off this now. My eyes go to the next down lineman. So next down lineman inside is here. So the read tells him to read there. Well, what's going on here? He's peeking outside here too. Okay, that's fine. Look at the next guy out here. So he just rides what we call riding the wave of your block. So you're looking at the, helmet more or less of the defender and going the opposite way. So watch. Puts his foot in the ground, runs through, in there. Let's watch that again. So watch. Helmets here, like reading a book. They get a great push also, which doesn't hurt. Boom. Get in the end zone, young fella. So there's kind of those 3 variations of you can stay on track, you can cut up, you can even cut back against the grain right there, but those 3 you're always getting forward. You're not trying to bounce it too much. You can if you want to, but you want to get positive yards, like you said, 10 yards north.
Yeah, and that's why he's perfect for it, because he doesn't believe in wasting time. He's not wasting any time. And the best part about it is had he made one slightly wrong read because he's so decisive, the worst thing that's going to happen is he's going to gain 1 yard.
Absolutely.
As opposed to losing 6 yards or dancing in the backfield, worst thing's going to happen is he's going to gain a yard. All right, well, you're a yard before, so it kind of worked. It didn't work how you wanted it to. Best case scenario, this perfect read, and had it a hat all the way across, no one to get both arms on Abram Smith, which you can't tackle him with just one.
And that's why they love him, because he's so decisive. He puts those defenders in a bind. Like you said, the picture might be kind of muddy. As a running back, they call it running through smoke. Why do they call it that? Because when it's smoky outside, you can't see super well, but he just runs through the smoke to where Reed might not be 100% perfect, but he makes it right by going fast, being decisive, and running behind his pads. So if you get enough of that on tape and you get the defense to be nervous about you running to the wide zone every other play, you start to get the defense a little bit anxious. And that's when the play action game comes into effect, and why Gary Bohannon has had a really, not easy, but it's been a much more simplified picture for him for defenses. He's not having to read, the entirety of complex exotic blitzes or crazy coverages thrown his way, because he's having a lot of it simplified because they have to account for the run game. So even right here, the line is going to essentially make a blocking scheme like it's going to be wide zone left. The play action itself, he fakes on air. Abram Smith is going this way. He's going to fake that way. Now you say, well, why can he do that? Because they're so worried about the tape they've seen throughout the week of them killing them on the outside zone. And the outside zone, wide zone scheme, this is your key. When the linemen take that first step. So watch. Watch what happens when they take that first step. Look, the whole line is moving to the left. Even him, he's taking a look at it here. He's taking a look at it here. This is their key. So we're not worried about the movement in the backfield for the defense. I mean, if you are, you're already wrong. A good defense keys the offensive line. Fake's not even to Abram Smith. So you have everybody now a half step slower because they're terrified of that wide zone. So Gary Bohannon, easy picture. Look at this. Wide open. Well, the closest man's what, 3-4 yards away? Make a lot of good things happen. You get RJ Sneed the ball with 3-4 yards of space. Shake and bake. Nice little move there. First down.
Yeah, and when I first saw him, like, they were doing it in the West Virginia game as well, where they're just faking the wrong way. And I thought the first time I was like, he made that work, but that was wrong. And then he did it again, and I was like, oh, no, he's doing it on purpose, because you can't. Honestly, had he done it a second time, Jeff Grimes would been like, buddy, come here.
Somebody else, come figure out the play.
I gotta tell you, it's worked out fine for you. But when that play goes to the right and you fake it to the left, Eventually, they're going to figure that out. But no, that's not really what they're doing here. As you said, it's a whole lot deeper than that.
They're very heady with what they know the defense is king, giving them different directions. So if you are looking in the backfield to begin with, you're probably already wrong and even more confused. So finally, on the goal line, when it comes down to just the big boys banging heads, Baylor having banged heads all the way down to get to the, let's call it, 2-yard line, it's advantage Baylor every single time, especially on the play action game. So second and goal, ran the wide zone to begin with to get down to the 2-yard line. So they're, defenses walk. I mean, look at this. Goal line formation. They're what we call the bear front. 5 down across the board. They're walked up. You don't think they're a little bit concerned about the wide zone right here? You got my man walked up over here. So they're going to sneak Dylan Doyle. I guess he's not a converted linebacker. He's a linebacker / fullback, utility player, whatever you want to call it. He's one of those old school guys. Might as well put a leather helmet on him. They're going to walk him up. So what would typically happen here, we'll backtrack it up a little bit. What would typically happen here is he's going to lead up, seal off the first thing that shows, run Abram Smith right down here to the goal line. So typical Baylor, being physical. It's what you would expect, right? It's what BYU expects. But what happens is, because they've done that so frequently, they catch him napping. He thinks he's about to get blocked. He braces for impact even a little bit. He goes, oh man, I beat the block. Awesome. Sneaks right out there. Touchdown.
Well, he was about to get blocked, just not by that guy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, he was. He picked the wrong guy he was going to get blocked by, and Dylan Doyle sneaks out and gets that touchdown, which was his second of the day at that point. Yeah. Linebacker, fullback, whatever he is. But yeah, you can see how it's got defenses. And of all the defenses it should have in a bind, it shouldn't be this one.
Right.
That's where the offense came from last year. Those guys should know it, but maybe they're kind of like, well, we didn't like it when we practiced against it. We still don't like it now.
And credit to Jeff Grimes and that offensive staff for being able to account for the tendencies of what they'd probably already seen in practice a year ago, being able to know the personnel and know how to tweak it just enough to be able to get in the end zone here quite a few times on the day.
All right, that's Chalk Talk. This is the big one, too, brought to you by Shorty's Pizza Shack here on 365 Sports. Please like and subscribe whenever you do. If you don't, all your Halloween candy will be razor blades. Now, that one's a deep one. That's probably mean. That's ouch. That's bad.
I mean,
it's just going to happen.
You got to subscribe.
All those different horror stories that you'll get PCP in your candy, that's what's going to happen. I don't do these things. I don't have control of them. I just know what happens if you don't.
Yeah.
The like and subscribe committee has laid that down to me. They're like the Illuminati. I don't know.
And thank goodness they're telling you. Otherwise,
I know. Otherwise, you wouldn't know.
It just ends up there, and
exactly.
you don't know any better.
You just have a razor blade and an apple, and you shouldn't give an apple on Halloween anyway. That's just the worst thing you can possibly do, other than maybe turn your light off and pretend you're not home.
Or not subscribe.
Yeah, or not subscribe. I maybe turn my light off and pretend I'm not home. Watch TV in a different room so people don't know.
I love
it. Just some tips for Halloween coming up this weekend. For JD Pickell and Armstrong Sims and Jack McKenzie, I'm Paul Catalina. Thanks to Shorty's Pizza Shack. Thanks to all of you for watching when you do and liking and subscribing to fend off whatever monsters I might send your way. This is the big one, too, on Sikkim 365 Sports.